Good morning, everyone. Yes, welcome back. So, it's this Nigeria Police Bill 2020. Well, it's now an act because you saw the notice yesterday that the president has signed it and sent it back to the clerk of the National Assembly. So, we're just considering some of those now. There's a backstory to it, how it all began, where we are, what do we expect moving forward. Where we do have Senator Haliru Jika, who is the chairman Senate Committee on Police Affairs. He joins us this morning from our studios in Abuja. Good morning, Senator. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, so good morning, Chamberlain.
All right, so there's a lot of background to this, as far back as 2004, when some of these all started, and then it went through several processes. You signed off on some of those proposals as well. So, tell us about having signed this bill by the president. If you give us a little bit of a backstory, because there was public hearing as well before getting to this stage.
Thank you very much. You see, the Police Act was a creation of the military in 1943. So there has never been any major repeal up until 2004. And then the recent one of the 2019 by the 9th Senate. It was introduced in the 8th National Assembly, which unfortunately expired with the life of that 8th Assembly. So we now see through our legislative intervention in the 9th National Assembly, we come up with the same bill concurrently in both chambers. That is the House of Representatives and the Senate. I sponsored the version of the Senate, and then my counterpart, the chairman of the House of Representatives, sponsored the one in the House. So we now come up and see where and identify those gray areas, what has not been captured, because our prayer is for us to have a well-refined and a well-behaved Nigeria police that is based on the accountability, transparency, and protection of fundamental freedom of Nigerians. So we come up with that, and now, as you rightly said, it goes through the various legislative stages. It was read on the floor of the Senate and the House of Representatives concurrently for the first time. Second time, it was referred to the floor to the committee. That is the standing committee. That is the Committee on Police Affairs. And then we deliberate as members and invite all critical stakeholders in the internal security architecture of Nigeria to come and have an input so that we can have a society-friendly police in this country. So those areas that we have differences between the House of Representatives and the Senate, we now come in a bicameral legislature. We have what we call a conference. So conference committee was set up by the two presiding officers of the both chambers. That is the Speaker and the Senate President and the President of the Senate. We come up together and identify, for instance, the issue of appointing the Inspector General of Police and the tenure of the Inspector General of Police, which the House proposes 4 years and the Senate proposes 5 years, which we resolve and now agree on 4 years, 4-year terms for the IGP. Then the issue of community policing, we now put a stiffen because the original act, that is the 1943 Act and the 2004 Act, says that the issue of community policing is voluntarily. So we now feel it is necessary that we should give them a stipend, even if it's a fixed amount for all the special constabularies in the Nigerian police. Then the issue of gender discriminality, where a female officer she's the most senior, then they will now go to the next person because he's a man. So we have to stop that in the system. So basically, in isometric view, this is what the bill seeks to achieve. Thank you very much.
Okay. Just one more. There's something Senator mentioned about the appointments, the tenure of the IGP. but I haven't heard him speak about the appointment of the IGP. I know it's one of those things that was also considered. But, you know, one of the concerns over the years has been that if the president is the one that has to appoint the IGP, there's the tendency to be able to control that IGP at any given point in time for whatever whim and caprice the person may have at any time. How does this bill address that?
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a major constraint here. You see, let me correct you, the appointment of Inspector General of Police is not done by the president alone. It's the police council. And the police council comprises of all the state governors of the 36 states of this country and former head of states. In the bill, we're even proposing the presiding officers of the National Assembly to be among those that will be appointing the Inspector General of Police. And to do that, we have to come through a major constitutional amendment, which is currently going on in the National Assembly. Let me give you an example of the name Nigerian Police Force. We have tried in the floor of the Senate and the House of Representatives by way of bill or motion to change the name Nigerian Police. But we cannot do that without amending the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Okay, but I don't know if that really does still answer that question. You talked about the police council, but we all know, and I believe that you may want to address how this new law also addresses that one, that the police council meets whenever the president says that they meet. There is no provision, no constitutional provision as to when they should meet. Does this new law address the timeliness, the frequency of the meeting?
As I said, we cannot do that unless through the through constitutional amendment. There is a committee now in the National Assembly to amend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That has to be addressed through the amendment of the Constitution. And the President has the powers to decide when the meeting holds. The National Assembly will now say this is how will not say this is how many times the police council will sit. That's an executive threshold to do that. Our own is to make sure that there are laws in place for them to operate.
But it's really interesting because, I mean, it is the president that will recommend the IGP to the police council. It is the president that determines...
President and...
Go ahead.
And other governors and other critical stakeholders.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a resolution. Yeah, it's not whatever the president says on the committee that holds. They have to agree to it, and then before they put a question, and then now approve it.
Now, a couple of issues really for Nigerians. They're thinking, how will this affect the look and feel of the Nigeria police force? I know there's been that back and forth, but I believe this act has put paid to that now, that it's now the Nigeria Police Force, as you said, because that's what the Constitution recognizes. But for the Nigerian out there, they're wondering, so how does this affect the conduct of the average policeman out there? What are the areas in this act, just to give people, benefit of some insight? What are those areas that really touch on the conduct of the Nigeria policeman on the streets?
You may recall that recently the president passed the police trust fund bill. Signed the police trust fund bill into law, which was also passed by this National Assembly. The main objectives of the trust fund is to fund the training, retraining, and state-of-the-art equipment and welfare of the Nigerian men and women in the Nigerian police force. So I think this will go a long way if these funds is used judiciously. on training and retraining. I said this earlier in this media, that the major problem of the Nigerian police is funding, and funding. Because I remember way back 2015-16, when I went for an oversight, as a chairman of the House Committee on Police Affairs when I was in the House of Representatives, we went to Plateau State. We went across the country. What we see that goes to the police division monthly as running cost is barely 35,000 naira. That cannot even buy stationaries, talk less of fueling patrol vehicles and other things. So they largely rely on the support they got from the executive arm of the government. That is the local government chairman or the state governor. So what this administration did is to increase the amount of funding in the Nigerian police. And now let me give you an example of this, what is happening now in the country, the security trend that is happening in the country. The police overhead is barely 1.4 billion naira, 1.5 billion naira. And there are a lot of operations going on. When you look at the military, the Operation Lafiya Dole, the funding of Operation Lafiya Dole is about 100 billion naira annually. Police have more operations, more men on the ground. The aim of the Operation Lafiya Dole is to recapture those areas that was taken by the insurgents. And now, if they have done that, it's left for the police now to go back and restore civil order there and relocate those people there. So if the police are handicapped, how can they do that? So I think the issue of the Nigerian police is funding, and funding.
Sounds to me as though you think, you're saying that, I mean, throwing money at the police in court, pardon the use of that expression, solves all the problems. So are you saying that the reason we have human rights violations, as reported, is because of funding? The issue of extrajudicial killing. I mean, you said the issue is funding. So how will that resolve those issues of human rights violations and all that? Go on, please.
What I mean is this. When you don't have a properly trained police, so what do you expect? That is why I said with the funding, we can now train them, because only God knows the kind of characters we're injecting into the system. Because when they receive the first training, and that's it. But if they are being trained constantly and we build a thorough and a well-behaved police that knows this job, we won't have this problem. So what I'm, in the essence is this, mostly when they give them the first training and then they recruit them into the Nigerian police force, that is the end. They just forget about them. They allow them to continue on going on with their own normal business. So when you don't retrain them constantly, this kind of thing is bound to happen.
Well, I see that there's a lot of focus on the operations of the police, and then you talk about welfare, the funding part of it. But some of the issues you mentioned earlier about the tenure of the IGP, I mean, what happens if the person who is appointed as IGP has got 2 years to retirement? That wouldn't be an issue, would it?
Yeah, I don't know, because the civil service, the police force is being guided by the civil service rule. So I think maybe in the case of this 4 years, they will have to shop for an officer who have 4 years remaining in the service or more to fill or to occupy the office of the IGP. I think that will solve the problem.
Because that could be a challenge. If he's the next qualified person to become the IGP and he's got 2 years to retirement and the law says the tenure is 4 years, wouldn't they feel hard done by if you meet that person and get the next person? That would breed some bad blood, don't you think?
Yeah, if you remember, during the appointment of the IGP Ibrahim Idris from Niger State, about 27 AIGs and DIGs were retired. This is not new in the system. That's how it has been operating. So I think this will not be a different.
Yeah, but I thought that these are part of the injustices, quote unquote, or anomalies that needed to be corrected, making some of these laws so that people don't think that they get to a certain position, they can't give their best anymore, and then they're eased out of the system.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that because I think there are some executive powers attached to that, which maybe the president may decide. I'm not a lawyer, so let me not delve into something that I have no idea. But I believe the president may have the power, because it's a paramilitary setting, so to maybe extend or decide how it goes.
There are some other issues that will...
Maybe through the...
Go ahead. Complete your thoughts, please.
Excuse me? Maybe but in conjunction, in collaboration with the Attorney General of the Federation, who will interpret the Civil Service Act or the law.
Let's turn to Mr. Chukuma, Innocent Chukuma, because, they were part of the people who brought in the one for 2004, and we built on it moving forward. He joins us via Zoom. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, having gotten to this stage, and, from what you've heard senators speak about some of the provisions that eventually scaled through. Are you satisfied that this act will address some of the fundamental issues that the country had raised about policing?
Let me begin by saying that it is a welcome development, and one does not expect one particular amendment to address anomalies that have been in existence for the past 77 years that we've been using the 1943 Police Act. There are certain sections in it that are welcome and would aid improvement in performance of the police. There were some sections that were rejected from the bill, which we hope in other amendments that will come in the future will be addressed. But I also have to place my comments with a caveat that I have not actually seen the signed copy from the president. And in the light of the controversies around the Company and Allied Matters Act, that should be underlined. So for me, when we started this process in November 2004 about amending the then 1943 Police Act, we had 5 areas of challenge with that act. One is that it has what we describe as insufficient articulation of the mission of the police in a democratic setting. So if you look at the then Section 4, it talks about what the police are employed to do to prevent and detect crime, and was very silent on fundamental rights. And we thought that in a democracy, there is need for a delicate balance between public security and individual liberties. Now, in the new act, it was addressed, because right after the whole role of preventing and dictating crime is the need to protect and respect fundamental freedom. There's also the issue of scattered provision in different acts. If you look at in the UK, where they have the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, you have in one body of law a comprehensive provision about the powers and what the police are supposed to do. In our own situation, that was not the case. So in this new act, there was an attempt to link it with the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of 2015 and make the two laws as a continuum and reinforces one another. There was also the issue that much is left to discretion in policing. If you look at the former Police Act, a lot of powers of arrest, search and detention were left loose. But in this particular act, there have been attempts to ensure what the limits of those powers are. Some of these include that police shall not arrest somebody on the basis of civil wrong or breach of contract. A suspect or defender may not be handcuffed, bound, or subjected. There's reasonable suspicion. You have all all along provisions that we thought, if adequately enforced, will help in addressing issues around fundamental rights. But as we were saying earlier, the whole issue around the appointment of the IG, they addressed the one of security of tenure, and I welcome the provision that once appointed, an IG stays in office for 4 years, which is a reasonable period of time for the person to develop his or her agenda and try to implement it. But the appointment process is still left to the president. The president begins and completes it without reference to the National Assembly or even some kind of public hearing, so that members of the public who have interacted with the particular persons will come and testify as to their integrity. There was also the provision that the person should hold a minimum of first degree. This was rejected in the new act. So you can
just one moment. You said something about the appointment before you move off of it. Senator, you can say the other time that the appointment of the IGP is not something he does solo, that he has to do it in consonance with the police council.
Yes, it's an advisory role. So this is actually not a new provision. In the former Police Act, the police council is there for the president to consult and be advised by them. But the practice is that IGs are appointed and removed without recourse to the police council. And even if you have police council in section, what role they have is advisory, which the president can accept or reject. So that is still does not meet the requirement of having the public play a role in the appointment of an important position such as the chief of police, which should be differentiated from the military service chiefs. This is a civilian organization. The police is a public police. It is not in the category of military services. So whoever comes or gets appointed, members of the public should have a framework of making inputs and testifying as to the integrity of the person before the person is confirmed.
Well, let's get back to Senator. How much involvement did the police have while this went on before it was signed in?
As I told you, through our legislative intervention, when the bill came to the National Assembly, we invited all critical stakeholders, that includes the Nigerian police, for their input. And then the public also and other private individuals and sectors to come and have their input, because, as I said earlier, we want to have a well-refined and well-behaved Nigerian police that is society-friendly. So that has been captured adequately. And the police were fully involved in the whole process from start to finish.
Well, it means that there's going to be a lot of training, because if it's the same police personnel who are not going to be sacked, but will have to bank on huge training for that to happen. But, you know, yes, the part of community policing, now we saw when the government signed off and then released some funds, or approved some funds for community policing, you saw the reaction of the country. Many still kept on saying, it's not really about some of those issues. It's about the structure of the police, how the people want to own the police. Now, in consideration of some of these views that people had, do you think this Police Act actually addresses those concerns that Nigerians have about, I mean, they talk about state police, for instance?
Yes. As I said earlier, this act captured the issue of community policing adequately. The whole concept of the community policing came up when the police feel the need to involve, that is, the citizen in policing. So when you go through the act, you will see that the police commissioner of a state is the chairman of that board, and in collaboration with the local communities there, be it a district head, a village head, a chief, or any critical stakeholder there in the state. And it goes down to the local government and to the ward level. And it has been adequately captured in this act.
Right. Because there's still a lot of questions as to this special constabulary. Yes, this act has given it a green light. Well, eventually when we see, we'll confirm if that is indeed the case. But you know that there are arrangements across states right now as it stands. And one wonders, where does that leave that arrangement that states have made? Does this act factor that in? Does it talk about collaboration? Because they say they want to collaborate with the police. But does this act speak about that?
Yes, it does, because as I said, we even go to the extent of looking at the provision and now insert a clause that will provide an allowance from them for them from the Federation account, so which is going to be shouldered by the Nigerian police. So that means the police will be fully responsible for that special constabularies, and they will be supervising whatever they do, and because they will be getting source of information from the grassroots, and then to the police authority for necessary action.
So just to be clear, for example, Amotekun, you're saying that this new act factors in Amotekun and says, well, there will be a collaboration with Amotekun. Is that what you're implying?
Yes, Amotekun is another form of community policing. There's nothing wrong with that. So they're all going to be captured, like what we have in the north here, the Hisba in Kano, and other local vigilante groups. They are all other forms of community policing. You may recall in the 8th Assembly, I also sponsored a bill for the establishment of the Vigilante Group of Nigeria, VGN, which will be supervised by the police for 5 years, after which they will be on their own. But unfortunately, the bill was not assented to. So it's the same people or the same organizations that will now be injected into the community policing system in Nigeria.
Is this recommendation, what you're saying now about this community policing, is this in tandem with the new insertion in Section 12, where you said that the Police Service Commission shall appoint such other persons to offices in the police force as are required for the effective and efficient performance of the functions of the police? Is that what this section is about?
I don't think so. I don't have the copy of the bill with me here, but as I told you, there are about 27 or 28 clauses that differs the House and the Senate, which we were able to resolve through conference. So I'm yet to see the clean and the final bill from the Clerk of the National Assembly. But all those things, all those areas have been adequately addressed in the bill.
All right, Mr. Chukuma, could you go ahead and speak to us? Because, I mean, we've seen the reaction that Nigerians had about community policing. Some thought, wait a minute, that's not really what we want. So there are those who were thinking, should they have hung on just a little while longer and accommodate some of these other areas? Because some still think that the funding and then the structure of the police, there are still question marks as to how they will function to the acceptance of Nigerians.
Great. Again, I have to emphasize that I've not seen the signed copy. So there is the Senate version, the report from the Senate, and then when they went into harmonization with the House, leading to the 28 clauses that needed to be harmonized. So again, until we see the version the President signed and analyzed it, we cannot say with certainty what is in the new act and what is not there. But if one relies on the Senate version, Section 115 to Section 118 covers the whole issue around community policing. Although I must caution that it's actually a watered version of community policing that we're talking about here, because it dealt specifically with the appointment of community policing committees at the state and local level, and perhaps at the federal level, where it says that it should comprise of police officers and people appointed from the community and restricted to helping the police to promote partnership with the community, promote communication, cooperation, improve services, transparency, and accountability. But if we want to look at the classical understanding of the concept of community policing, which is a philosophy and strategy that should permeate and pervade the entire Nigerian police force and should inform decentralization of power so that every police officer on the beat out there feels that he or she is empowered to engage communities and find solutions to their problems. If you're looking at it that way, I must tell you that community policing is yet to be fully addressed here. So what we have here is at best an improvement of the police community relations committee that we all are used to. So that's what I will say by that. And then when I started, I was speaking about 5 areas that we had challenges with the old Nigerian Police Act. I spoke about 3. 5 out of those 5, only 3 were addressed, which is the mission, the scatter provision, and policing discretion that were tried to constrain under this new act. But the whole area of the ineffective and inefficient organization of the police, talking about the centralization of powers, too many activities begin and end at the force headquarters, including control of the funds. They were
All
not
right, then.
really addressed in this
So
this new act.
what we will do, gentlemen, yeah, we'll still have a lot of grounds to cover, but we'll do that at a later date so that we can, look at some of those other clauses that people still have questions about. But we thank both of you, Innocent Chukuma, Regional Director, West Africa, Ford Foundation, as well as Senator Hale Rujika, Chairman, Senate Committee on Police Affairs. We do thank you for your time this morning. Mr. Olaleye Quadri, the president of TUC, joins us now to give his perspective on the developments and perhaps what to expect. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. So, yes, Labour in conversation with the federal government on some of these demands. So, just bring us up to speed. What is Labour asking of government?
Good morning.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, good morning. What we requested from government, first of all, let me refer to some of the comments I had on this channel about the man that just spoke, about Labour going to a roundtable with government to discuss the way forward. Let me bring to your notice that we have written several letters to federal government of Nigeria on alternative way of running the economy. And you all will attest to it that on Punch, dated 30th of April 2020, TUC wrote a letter to government on alternative way to run the economy, where we spoke about the post-COVID economic recovery, where we made mention of diversifying the economy. And it was because we didn't get a positive response from government. And that is where we have to react now, that there is increase in PMS and other valuable services to Nigerian workers and the populace. This government has refused to listen to Labour. Before now, there has never been any meeting between Labour and government since COVID-19. And now that they have increased the price of PMS and also increased electricity tariff and also introduced what we know as the stamp duty, all these are eating on the little salary that we have.
But
you are
I think
well informed.
What he's saying is, even though you've not answered the first question, what I think he's saying is that why does Labour have to wait until this position by government when they take this step before you then respond? Because what he's saying is, first is that if you had a template and a plan that you had submitted to the government, which they were supposed to implement on a quarterly basis or in different phases, if they default at phase 2 or 3, then you raise issues. And phase 2 or 3 doesn't necessarily have to be when there is a fuel price, either deregulation or fuel hike. That's the point he's waiting. He thinks Labour usually waits for this to happen. Then when you go on strike, max is 3-4 naira difference, and then 2-3 years later, you're back to the same position.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that this time around we took a preventive method by writing to federal government calling for discussion since April 2020. That letter has been delivered to Mr. President, and up to now we have not been called to discuss. And we have provided alternative way of running the economy, which we mention how to introduce modular refineries to make them work, and also to spend enough money to make our refineries work, so that there will be no issue of exchange rate that is causing the increase in the price of PMS. But this government will not listen to labor except we put an action. So after waiting for a long time and all this happened, we have no other options than to send ultimatum to the federal government.
All right, so Mr. Quadri, could you tell us what is Labour asking of governments this time?
Yeah, this time around, what we're asking governments is that no matter the plan they have for the future, they should first of all reverse the increase in the price of PMS, then also reverse the increase in tariff of electricity. These two things are very, very important to Nigerian workers and the populace at large. Then we cannot be discussing way forward. Like I explained on the increase in PMS, the PPPRA has a format that they use in calculating what price should PMS be sold. And we discovered that out of all about 13 items used in the calculation, about 11 are fixed. The remaining 2 are variable that can change anytime. And the most important one is the exchange rate. So over a time, PPPRA have written letter to Mr. President to talk to Central Bank of Nigeria to provide enough forex for the importers of this PMS to be able to bring in the PMS needed at ease. And they should provide that forex at the official exchange rate. But the problem is that based on the information we have, these importers don't have enough forex. So they have no other option than to go to black market to get it at a higher rate. And that is what is causing the increase in the price. Since the Mr. President has that capacity and the power to authorize Central Bank of Nigeria to provide it at official rate, I think it's very simple for Mr. President to do that. Then the next question is, why are we not having enough forex for these people? It means we have to do a kind of holistic audit or forensic audit to see how we make use of the available forex. It means we have some illegal usage of that forex. That is why it's not enough. And that is what we are telling Mr. President. We are engaging them constructively to let us look for solution. But the problem is that they are not listening to us. Look at the increase in tariff of electricity. Does it mean Nigerians should continue to pay for inefficiency of Disco, Genco, and the rest? I want to refer you back to a minister sometimes ago who mentioned that they deliberately sold off Disco, Gensco to their friends. It means whatever the government is doing now is to put more money in the pocket of their friends. So we cannot be paying for inefficiency of the Disco and Gensco. You remember at the beginning of this regime,
just
Mr.
a moment.
President promised that to provide prepaid meters to everybody free of charge.
Well, those are issues. Those are issues you have raised really about the power sector. A lot of issues really about the rise in the tariff. But when you spoke about what happens with petroleum importers, how you say forex is being gotten in the black market, I'm not quite sure that is how it works. But the question now is, you are saying the government should revert to the previous price, and are you saying that subsidy should be returned, because that would mean the government has to step in to make up for that that difference? Are you asking for subsidy to be returned? And one wonders, don't forget that subsidy is not in 2020 budget, so how will that be provided for? And what happened in 2016? Because it was controversially removed, the price went up, and it appears as though Labour did not do anything. So what exactly do you want the government to revert back to?
Now, the issue is that as far as Labour is concerned, subsidy have been removed for a long time, even before 2016. And if you remember during the last regime, when the central bank governor was still Governor Sanusi then, you remember that they made presentation that they were going to remove subsidy. And we all believe that subsidy have been removed. I wonder, how did they subsidize Where did they subsidize from? I don't understand that. I don't understand. Because most of the time we keep on talking about subsidy, and there's no subsidy on this thing. We are talking of exchange rate to be given. Central bank decide that official exchange is 360, and before they can do that, it means they have enough forex to provide for genuine importers. If they are be giving forex to people that are doing other businesses, well, that should not be at the expense of Nigerian workers.
But Mr. Quadri, I'm just wondering, when you say that they should provide forex so that people don't get it from the parallel market, one wonders, this has always been the case, providing forex. Now, assuming they keep providing forex, how does that affect the price of fuel? Because the value of the naira to the dollar will keep changing. What is Labour proposing such that we earn this forex in that, as much as we require, such that they can buy this product right here? So what's your proposal to the government about that?
Our proposal to the government is that government should revive our refineries. The Minister of Petroleum States mentioned during his public address that our refineries have not been working for almost 5 years. And we keep on spending billions in maintaining those refineries. So the issue is that why don't we, if we are removing subsidy, why don't we use that subsidy over years since 2016 till now? Why don't we use that savings to revive the refineries? They promised that they are going to have modular refineries. We told them, okay, let us have a program that on yearly basis, these are the numbers of modular refineries that we are going to bring up. But there's no record to that.
So have they told you, or did you ask? Because even right from recent history, 1999, the former President Obasanjo, Jonathan, even this government, they've issued licenses. So assuming maybe this government has issued 38 licenses and 10 of them have expired, the phases of these licenses, have you found out why is it that they issue licenses and people or refineries are still not functional? New refineries haven't cropped up, apart from one or two of these current ones that we know. What is the challenge there? Why are they not being addressed? Have you raised them?
We have raised all these questions. We even accused government that you are good in issuing licenses without follow-up. So if you carry Labour along, this is the numbers of licenses we have issued over the time.
Okay, then, sorry, what did you identify as the reason why those who they issued these licenses are not able to come on stream? What are the reasons?
Well, I believe the reason is because government is not following up with them. It's not enough to issue licenses, but you have to follow up, you have to assist. We even suggested that some of those refineries in Niger Delta that they were saying they are illegal refineries, let us standardize them. Let's help them with SON, NAFDAC to work with them, to make them formalize them so that they can refine what their locality can consume. And by then, we don't need we are not going to have the issue of forex.
Mr. Quadri, you talked about the refineries not working and what your union is doing, what Labour has been trying to do about that. It's on record that even on the website of DPR, that some of these refineries, their productivity began to taper down from like the mid-90s. And if you check the front pages of some of the papers this morning, you'll find out that some of them have not produced anything since between 2016 and 2017. Throughout that time, we didn't hear that Labour protested that these refineries are not working. Now, over the years, even since the beginning of this Fourth Republic, no one heard that Labour was protesting that the refineries were not working. Consequence of which would be increase in petroleum prices. How is it that we didn't hear from Labour any time about the refineries not working, but we only hear from Labour whenever there is a fuel price hike? How is that?
Well, what I will tell you on that is that most of the time we try to engage the government, put pressure on them to do what they are supposed to do. But government don't listen to labor most of the time, and it is only when it affects everybody that we have to come out. We have to come out to protest. I can tell you we have a lot of research book on how to revive the refineries. If you want it, I can send a copy to you, but the government would not listen. I've just mentioned a letter that has been written since April on alternative way of running the economy. Up to now, government has not called us for discussion. It's only when there is problem and labor speak out that they call us to discuss. So we do a lot, but it's only when it affects the public that we come to react and everybody see us.
Say that it's sometimes labor reacts only when it affects labor directly. One of the things that you heard on the soundbite before you came on was that that man, Alfred Kemekwado, was saying that sometimes after all such conversations with labor, that government will give labor leaders some money, and consequently they will just come back and say, you know, okay, we can now go back to work with very marginal removal of money that has been increased. Is it true that labor usually gets money from government whenever they go for these consultations?
Well, I'm sure everybody is entitled to his own opinion or his view. But as far as I am concerned, as the president of Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, we have never benefited anything financial from government, and we are not going to request for that. Because whatever government gives to us, how does that translate to the well-being of our members? So we don't do that. Well, if he has his evidence, he can publish it. But I want to show understanding that he has his own opinion. He's also encouraging us and giving us caution not to do that. So I appreciate him for that.
All right. So at the moment, you say you're asking government to revert the tariffs in fuel and that of electricity. But we also know
and
that
stamp duty as well.
And stamp duty. Right. But we also know. So if the money that have already been collected, are they supposed to return it to the customers who they've collected these monies from?
That would be very difficult, but at least where we are now, let them reverse it so that the price can go to where it was yesterday.
So is that to say that if that doesn't happen and Labour goes on strike on September 28th, Labour will not accept 2 naira reduction or 3 naira reversal of the petroleum pump price? It's your demands or nothing?
Yeah, let me clarify something. We have 2 ultimatums given. TUC has given 7 days ultimatum, which we expire on the 22nd Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, if government have not answered to our questions, then we shall mobilize and move to the streets. Then we are going to down tool. Then NSC has given 2 weeks ultimatum, which is going to expire maybe on the 27th, and action will be taken on the 28th. We are going to follow these 2 ultimatums judiciously, and we are not talking about reducing the price by 2 naira or 3 naira. What we are saying is that they should reverse it back to where we were in July. So, and that is the price that will be acceptable by the Nigerian workers.
Continue subsidy.
Hello?
Okay, well, just before we wrap up, I mean, some of those who have those licenses actually say the reasons for some of them is that there are different phases, and those phases are capital intensive, and banks wouldn't fund it. So they thought that these are some of the issues that they expect Labour to have waded in and see how does government look at those processes and make it a lot easier with a lot of funding and financing template and structure to enable them come on stream. But I guess we'll have to look at this conversation at a later date. But we do thank you for your time this morning, Olaleye Quadri, President of TUC.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, now to the next one now, which has to do with food security. They say, look, well, all of this conversation we're having may likely affect food as well. And if they don't do anything about it, you just may have the staple bread have a lot of challenge.
Well, bread is not the only one. Remember, even from the first quarter into the second quarter, those figures had already begun to come out. That, you know, generally we might need to do something about food, especially in the light of rain, people not being able to go to the farms and all of that. How far or not that has affected what we're about to talk about, you'll find out as we engage Mr. Tosin Jemide, who is President, Premium Bread Makers Association of Nigeria, PBAN, and as well as Dr. Abiodun Daramola, Director, Center for Agricultural Technology and Entrepreneurial Studies at Bells University of Technology. Let me begin with Mr. Jemide. So, you want to bring up to speed what exactly is happening? Why must we pay more for bread? Okay, well, I think there's a need for a background to this conversation. Watch this.
Nigeria currently ranks at number 93 out of 117 in the World Global Food Index. A disappointing score for a largely agrarian society. Agriculture alone accounts for over 40% of the employment in Nigeria. It's a sector in dire need of government support, considering it used to account for more than 70% of the country's GDP at independence. Now it contributes just over 20%. The Buhari administration in March of 2018 set up the National Food Security Council, specifically to ensure food security in the country. The president believes the council is delivering on its mandate.
In the last 5 years, we have recorded notable achievements despite the decline in GDP by 6.1% in second quarter of 2020. As a direct result of coronavirus, the agricultural sector continued to grow because of government's targeted agricultural policies. We have been blessed by God with 6 successive rainy seasons, ensuring good harvest since 2015. The nation thanks our farmers for rising to the occasion and answering our national call.
The council is also taking credit for the reduction in the cost of food over the months and wants Nigerians to expect high output this harvest season. Its deputy chairman, the governor of Kebbi State, Atiku Bagudu, says the country has achieved self-sufficiency in many crops.
Harvest has commenced in some parts of the country in respect of some crops, and because of that the prices have begun to respond to harvest by beginning to come down. Maize was never on the importation ban list. What CBN did in order to support domestic maize production was to restrict the sale of foreign exchange for maize importation, and but maize is not a banned commodity yet.
President Buhari has instructed the central bank not to issue a kobo of the country's reserves for the importation of food items and fertilizer. He insists that the focus should be on empowering local producers and farmers. That way the government will ensure food security while fixing the unemployment rate. From the State House in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
All right, Dr. Abiodun Daramola, Director, Center for Agricultural Technology and Entrepreneurial Studies at the Bells University of Technology. I'd like to start with you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, obviously, you also have to start paying a little more for bread, going back by what the Premium Bread Makers Association, there's a second association as well, going by what they're saying. But let's begin with Mr. Tosin Jemide, who is the President, Premium Bread Makers Association of Nigeria. Please tell us, Mr. Jemide, thanks for joining us. Why do we have to toe this line? Mr. Jemide, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, please go ahead. Now, we know, I mean, it's been in the news that for about 2 years or thereabout, there's been this conversation about people having to pay more for bread and allied products, especially because of the increase in prices of baking ingredients, baking products, and all of that. Why now? What's made this one more peculiar, seeing that from what you have said, it has to affect the prices that people pay? Hitherto, there were increases in those things, but it didn't affect the prices of commodities. So why now?
Well, what's been happening really is that the bakers have been subsidizing a lot for the consumers because we understand it's a very price-sensitive market, and people don't have that kind of expendable income to throw around. So an additional increment in price will generally begin to affect the common man. So it's been a very tough decision for us, but the fact is we have to deal with the reality. The cost of production has been going up incessantly. In the last 4 months between pre-COVID and now, it has been astronomical and totally unbearable. So, I mean, we've come to the point where we know, that there's absolutely nothing we can do about it.
The specific issues.
Sorry, take that again.
What are the specific issues?
Okay, so we're dealing with price increases. Most, if not all, our inputs have some sort of import components. Flour, which is like 60 to 70% of our inputs, has the wheat import component. Flour millers have to import wheat. They import it at the dollar rates. They generally will go to the black market, parallel market, to get their forex. And that constantly hikes the price of flour. In the last, between March and now, flour has gone up 6 times. So, I mean, who are manufacturers who produce bread, there's no way we can, continue to absorb these increases from our suppliers of raw materials and not be able to, jack up the prices.
Dr.
So
Damola,
this generally...
okay. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Conclude.
This generally cuts across board. I mean, I'm talking about flour alone, but if you look at all our raw material inputs down to the smallest item, we've experienced huge increases, so we've gotten to the point where we have no choice.
All right, Dr. Damola, how do you react to this? It'll seem like indeed it's a long time coming, right?
Yeah, thank you for having me. The most of the bread, I mean, the 90% of the wheat we use in Nigeria is virtually being imported, and it's not sustainable. I listened to the Bakers Association the other time, and they were saying that they have to rely on a black market to import. That shouldn't be. I expect that for a commodity, an essential commodity like flour, we should have government giving the importers of wheat direct rates that will make it sustainable for them to import. While at the same time, I am sure in some part of Nigeria, we have some part of Nigeria that can actually grow wheat. We have some species of wheat that can grow in Nigeria. I think government need to raise seedlings and start to give it to farmers, direct seedlings to farmers to sustain the production locally. Thank you.
So what input do universities of technology, such as yours, have in all of this to ensure that at least they stand in the gap and make good use of technology?
Yes, thank you. The technology is being applied in our own sense because we engage in capacity building, developing the capacity building in agriculture. We just conducted a virtual workshop telling the whole world about opportunities in agriculture, agribusiness, and agro-engineering. And the technology is there. We have the manpower. We have the trained academics. So we are poised to train young farmers, interested farmer retirees, people that want to engage in farming. We have partnership with IIT and other groups to empower people that want to go into production.
So which of the technology is there now specifically for this purpose?
The technology that is there is to engender wheat production in Nigeria, in particular areas that the soil component can support the growth.
Right. So let's find out from Mr. Jemide. There's been a lot of drive about, buying made in Nigeria, encouraging local production such that we don't have to try to get forex, which eventually makes things expensive. So when you try to, venture into that area, trying to maybe buy local, patronize those that produce locally, what do you find?
Well, buy local is a very noble venture. I applaud the government for that, but I think that we need to be systematic about this. Now, we do not have the capacity yet. We find that there's scarcity in trying to buy local because there are no economies of scale. We also find out that it is more expensive buying local because you don't have economies of scale. So, for a manufacturer, it is easier to import. Secondly, the wheat that is produced or grown in Nigeria is not really the kind of wheat that goes well with the flour that we use to bake. I know that the millers do not like to use it because I think it's the protein, or it has something to do with the gluten, and it doesn't give you the best quality flour.
Okay,
so
a couple of things.
We have to look at all those things and, okay, besides that.
Pardon me, a couple of things here. Now, if that were the case, are we working with institutions here? Because we just heard him talk about IIT and some other agencies are here to fine-tune some of these things and address that challenge. And then I do remember, too, that when Mr. Additional was Minister for Agric, he was talking about you can produce bread with cassava and some of the other variants. So what's going on?
I would like to see the cassava that was produced with bread. I mean, the bread that was produced with cassava, sorry, because for me it was a lot of hype. The bakers never really, we never saw any bread baked with cassava.
I thought the UACs and the likes.
Tried it.
Oh, you tried it. What happened with it?
Yes. Okay. Do you buy cassava bread? Do you see it?
Because you stopped producing it?
Because there's no cassava. First of all, if I want to buy 1 kilo of cassava, it is more expensive than 1 kilo of wheat bread. Secondly, the cassava in the bread that we know to be bread is not really edible. It has a very funny, bitter taste.
All right,
there's a lot of...
That's taken, Mr. Jemide, but let me very, very quickly, 30 seconds, Dr. Daramala, you want to respond to that very quickly?
Yeah, I think we have to start with our own products. The wheat that is produced in Nigeria, the glutenin or whatever is there, those are anti-nutrient factors which can be worked on. And we need to incorporate a little of cassava with the fry dryers we have. IIT have done it.
Has that been proven by any science?
Yes,
that it works?
yes, we have cassava bread by IIT. I have visited, I have seen that. So we have to start with what we can produce.
Perhaps then we need to begin this conversation between the technologists and the bakers. But we have to thank you very much for your time this morning. Mr. Tosin Jemide is President, Premium Bread Makers Association of Nigeria, and Dr. Abiodun Daramala is Director, Center for Agricultural Technology and Entrepreneurial Studies, Bells University of Technology. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.